Hello there everybody and welcome to a new video for Against the Storm. In this one I got 10 tips and tricks for players on the Viceroy difficulty clawing their way up to the Prestige difficulty. So this is where the game packs up on challenge, and these tips and tricks are suited for people who don't deem themselves beginners anymore but aren't still quite there yet in the Prestige levels, or you just ended up being curious, and I hope you find this list entertaining and helpful as well. Let's get started with number 1. The first thing that your colonies should aim for is the creation of complex food. So your first few buildings that you draft should be either dedicated towards the allocation of really important strategic resources like high quality building resource production, high quality food production, or the creation of stuff like pickled goods, jerky, all these things. Basically everything that shows up in these tabs here is something you want to have, and this should be your first bigger milestone, because this complex food does create resolve and it does make your people therefore happy, but on top of that you also start multiplying your basic food. In a nutshell, you put 5 units of meat in and you get 10 units of jerky out. This means this stuff is doubly good. It multiplies your food, it makes people happy, and therefore a steady supply of complex food should be always the first thing you try to tackle on your way towards the victory. Number 2 regards one type of cornerstone things that I want to point out because they are really that good. Whenever you find a cornerstone that has the word delivery line in it, it is something that you probably might want to have. Every cornerstone that gives you a flat income per minute of a certain resource is very powerful, simply because it means that you'll get something without taking any effort for it, and you also get it for the remainder of the game. This thing here, for example, means that this colony will always have a steady surplus of fabric, and they won't have to worry in a larger picture about that. So whenever you can get these, really try to think hard about whether or not you want the other cornerstones when it comes to the queen's things you can select per year, or sometimes you also find them in various little quest rewards and stuff like that. You can also sometimes get cornerstones as a reward, just like here, and sometimes a delivery line is also possible from an event. In a nutshell, these things are really good, and I can highly recommend them as some of the most powerful cornerstones in the game. Number 3 regards a special way of trading that you can and should unlock as fast as possible, and that's trade routes. Trade routes allow you to take packs of provisions and a certain material, and over some time you get some amber back. This is really massive. Provision packs can be made out of various different food types. There are a lot of cornerstones that give you free provision packs. If you happen to have herbs, you can make them out of something which isn't even considered food. In a nutshell, it's not that hard to come to provision packs. So why are trade routes so good, you might ask yourself? Several reasons. First off, it's a steady supply of amber, which is always a good thing. Secondly, there's a lot of cornerstones that actually interact with the amount of goods you have sold, with the amount of trade routes you have started, all these things, and they also level up. The more often you trade with a certain city, the more amber you'll get back. Also, that means it is something that pays off in the longer run. All in all, trade routes are a very easy way of selling away the goods that you don't need currently, transform them into amber, and with some luck even go into an entire victory strategy by opting hard into trade. That's entirely possible. Be that as it may, trade routes are something I strongly recommend to use every game, because they are really that powerful, unless you cannot. Now then, number 4 regards farming. So whenever you have fertile soil and you have humans, you are basically ought to do farming. Farms utilize the fertile soil in their vicinity. Let's see if we can draft one real quick. So, sadly not. But Every building that requires fertile soil for the production is, in a nutshell, an endless producer of resource. If you have humans, they excel at farming, so you have even chance of double income. This is so special because steady income that doesn't deplete is a very, very rare and valuable good in Against the Storm. In this game, usually resources, they deplete. Therefore, it is really valuable to have a steady income. The downside for these is that you really have to work hard for it, and if you don't have humans at your disposal, the yields from farms are quite a bit lower than from your foraging camps, especially if you have access to the specialized foraging camps. The positive side about them, they are endless resource patches, but either way, I'd strongly recommend utilize them. They are really that powerful. Number 5 is a kind of a mindset thing or a strategy thing, and I want to point out that in this game, unlike other city builder games, a stable state is not possible. I mean with that, you will not be able to build your city to a certain stability level before you start racking up those reputation points to win the game. This game doesn't work like that. You better are after reputation points from minute 1 if you can, because due to the fact how everything here is made, resources deplete, hostility rises over the course of the years, so all in all the game gets harder the more time passes, always. So there is nothing you can do against that, and therefore if you come from other city builders, you probably want to refrain from that idea if that's in your mind. You are playing to win this game and not so much about making your city having a stable income before we consider getting that stuff here done, because the queen's going impatient from minute 1. Now then, number 6, I want to talk about tools. So tools are victory points, basically. That's because all over the map you will have abandoned caches, and abandoned caches can be opened with tools or sent with tools to the Citadel, where they yield reputation points. Therefore, unlike many other goods in this game, tools translate directly into victory points. This is worth knowing because that makes them a very, very attractive reward in any case, because that means regardless of your drafted buildings, of your current strategy, of whatever, tools will always add in an option to get yourself some quick and easy reputation points. I often end games with these, so I let them lie around until the very end of the game, until I only need a couple of extra reputation points, but don't shy away from breaking them open if you happen to need the resources in there quite badly. But I personally like to see it like I allocate tools as long as I can, and I then use these for the last bit of a victory point or for a quick infusion of cash. There's a lot of goodness coming out of tools. Use it. Number 7 is regarding a certain type of buildings, and that's the service buildings. With service buildings, I refer to all these buildings that utilize consume these items and make people happy accordingly. So, in case you are unfamiliar with these, every species has a need for certain services. Humans like leisure and religion and so on and so forth. And if they can go in there, use some incense, they fulfill their need for that stuff and they get super happy. It's one of the strongest bonuses to resolve in the game. But even if you don't have access to these items, service buildings are still quite useful. So for example, the monastery here, if it has 3 workers, it will lower the hostility by 100. That's an entire level. Every service building has a distinct quality, a distinct perk. Not always are these good for your current strategy, but sometimes it is so good to have only that perk, even if you don't have access or the capability to produce the items in there. Also worth mentioning, if you have one of those buildings and you happen to see on the trader that visits your colony some incense or some ale, you can use that for a quick infusion of resolve bonus as well, or you sometimes see it here as a reward. Either way, service buildings are good. even if you don't have a steady income of the materials necessary to utilize them. Just keep one thing in mind: when you draft them and you want to build them, they are the most costly buildings in the game in terms of resources needed. So you have to be able to afford them. They require workers to do any good, and they require a lot of resources to do any good. Therefore, avoid drafting them too early, because they can really, well, shove you into a wrong direction, because if you start too early with them, you don't get the benefits, and you probably fall flat due to that. Now then, number 8. I want to go over a simple and quick explanation of the consumption control and what you can do with it. So this is a tool that you need to unlock at the Burning Citadel, and it allows you to define what people are allowed to use and not to use. I don't want to make this any complicated, because this thing can get quite complicated. I just want to point out one thing. The moment you are able to produce any complex food, you should really consider locking the ingredients from public usage. So for example, if we're producing jerky out of meat, by doing this, you make sure that nobody will consume the ingredient of the complex food, because that would be a waste. It would be a terrible waste. Therefore, it's really powerful to cross out the foods that you are actually processing. This is a very, very simple way to use this menu without understanding too much about the rest. This way you can make sure that the food will get refined. And if ever hunger goes too badly, you can still re-enable them. There's no problem in that. So that's a very, very simple usage of the consumption control that I meant to introduce here. Number 9 is work with the seasons. That means work accordingly to the many, many things that seasons bring in this game. I mean with that, check out your drizzle bonus and do something with it if it is a timed based bonus. Sometimes you have a drizzle bonus that gives you a certain reward if you do open glades during this season or whatever. So this is one thing, but the other thing is also when you open up danger glades, you always find some kind of event that you need to partake in, and these require a certain amount of time. Therefore, my standard procedure is to open up the glade in the very late stages of the storm, so I can immediately start during the drizzle to get that event resolved, because many of these events have very negative side effects that you just don't want to suffer from while there is storm. In a nutshell, this game revolves a lot around knowing when to do something and when not to do something. This involves a lot of things, but in a nutshell, try to avoid risky things right before there is the storm, and try to do all the risky endeavors right after the storm. And with that, you will develop your own strategy and your own pacing with how you work with the storm season, the drizzle bonuses and all. It is a very vital part of the gameplay, and I cannot emphasize it enough that you can get yourself some easy successes out of that if you check out those bonuses and time your actions accordingly. Now then, number 10 is the last one on my list, and it regards the Hearths. So first off, I want to emphasize that you should try to unlock the the encampment modifier thingy here. This costs you a couple of resources at the Blazing Citadel, but it allows you to go for an upgrade that only requires you to have 14 people here, a couple of decorations, and it results in a global +2 resolve bonus. Very easy to rush towards to at the very beginning of the game, and very powerful. The other modificators here are also very powerful, of course, but this one is very cheap to get and doesn't require much investment. Therefore, I recommend you to rush it and get your hands on the bonus, on the unlock of the bonus as fast as possible, because a +2 to resolve is really cool to have. It's also worth mentioning, and another part of it, that you should always try to build those small hearths as long as you have wildfire essence, because these can have this encampment bonus as well. So that means if you have this thing here built up and you fulfill these requirements another time, you get another +2. And this stacks up quite nicely. Therefore, try to build as many of these hearths as you can afford and stack them out to be at least encampments. If you can, of course, these other bonuses are really massive too. Now then, that's been this list. I hope you found it helpful. This will, of course, be an incomplete list, so if you have any further tips for players in that experience level, let them know in the comment section. I always love to hear from you folks. And leave a thumbs up on that video if you'd be so kind to subscribe. I'd be also very, very grateful. That being said, check out the description box down there. There's other Against the Storm links there, and I'd be really grateful if you'd check them out too. Have a wonderful day, and see you soon.